better understanding of the pathways that there are across Europe and all the difficulties that NNA has in delivering those pathways. But in the end, it's all about athlete development. So we started out with looking at existing models. That there are many existing models throughout Europe. And we started with looking at the existing models, for example, from UEFA, what we got in Belgium, what we got in Germany, all the countries, Euro hockey countries, RNAs that have a coach pathway. And then we looked at outside just sports and looking at, for example, Rick already mentioned the European qualification framework. And since at the time we were reviewing our qualification framework in the Netherlands, I used that as a model, together with the European qualification framework, as a model to start working on a hockey-specific education framework for coaches. So, and in the Netherlands, we've got our National Olympic Committee has a qualification framework for coaches, which is the same. We use the same basis for every sport linked to our National Olympic Committee. So what we tried to do was come up with a way in which we could in which we can translate those frameworks to a hockey-specific context, and being thorough enough that starting NA, or we can compare frameworks with the 6-7 nations that already have a framework. So we need to be specific enough, but vague enough, so we can work around all the mandatory requirements some countries have. I think it worked out pretty well. So what we first did was look at the roles and the working environment on each level. So we decided pretty early on, also together with the FIH Academy, that we would look at 6 levels from the so level 2 till 7 for the European qualification framework. And first of all, we decided on what are the roles and working environment for those specific coaches. You can imagine that, for example, is more complex and more difficult working in a bigger nation, for example, in the German Bundesliga or the Dutch Hoofdklasse, than it is to work on a low-level club, with all due respect, in, for example, Slovenia. So we looked at those roles and working environment, and then we set out to look at the main responsibilities for those coaches. So you can imagine that, and I'll come back to that a bit later, but we've got one of the criteria is managing staff. But when you start at grassroots level, you obviously don't have a staff yet. So we start, for example, managing staff, we start at level 3, because then typically you will start getting staff members within your coaching team. And last but not least, we look at the different criteria or the different competencies for each level, and we make learning outcomes. So it is possible for, let's say, if I want to compare the Dutch education group with the German, we do that on a learning outcome basis and not on a basis of what is actually taught. So it's easier to compare, and then obviously for each country it is to decide whether or not you want to do some specific courses as well, or parts of courses on a level, say on a level 4, for example. So you have a bit of a couleur locale. So these are the 7 main responsibilities that we came up with. So in the middle, obviously, there's personal growth and reflection, where it all starts as a coach, and then those 6 areas of being a coach, managing field training, managing the environment, coaching a game, managing staff, coaching players, and selecting players. What we did throughout the project was involve all the NAs within the project, but also together with Michel, who leads the coaching committee, we also involved the coaching committee, so we could get loads of input from all those different entities and all those different NAs. And what we then set out to do was pilot our coaching framework, and looking at some consulting or setting up grassroots level coaching courses in Slovenia. And Dick is going to tell a bit more about the pilot within Slovenia, and then I come back and tell a bit about Swiss hockey and what's.
I'm Dick Westers from Hockey Magic. I've been in the train for 5 hours, so get me into the stuff. We did a hands-on educator course in Slovenia, and it was based on the outcomes of the qualification framework. But what I want to tell you is what task and objective we had. And I took some objectives to just go make an overview of what we did and pick some nice things from it, and not do the whole pilot, because it's a lot of, also in the report is a lot of stuff. Task and objectives. Our task was simple: develop, prepare, organize, evaluate an educator course in Slovenia with the following goals. The main goal was to increase the number of coaches and develop their skills. Increasing, maximize the number of hockey players, that would be an indirect effect. Set up hockey standards, also by making a good educator course. And increase enjoyment of hockey. I will come to that later. All what is underlined, I will come to that later, more specific. Optimize the involvement in the hockey community. That's a new outcome from educators. We did it in the pilot, just to look where it leads us. Now I'll come to that also. Furthermore, the pilot will give practical experience and insight to advise hockey in the Bureau Hockey Institute for future similar programs. So the first objective I want to dive into: contribute, develop coaches, and increase the numbers. So of course the effectiveness of the educator course must lead to capable educators, and that's why we started from the competences of the EHF and FIH. And there will be also a lot of, in the qualification framework, there will be much overlap. And we also put from Hockey Magic our own insights also in it. One of our things we like is to put a lot of learning experience in the course. So do face-to-face sessions, and we did that in June and September for a few days. In September we did let the educators under our mentoring execute course, coach course level 1, CC1. We did remotely guided assignments from August to November, and so the educators got assignments, got tasks to do it at their home, at their clubs, and we monitored online, and they made portfolios from it. In the course, we focused on didactical skills, not so much on techniques, because the level of the technical level of the educators to be is not the same as like in countries Holland, England, Belgium. So we thought when we learned the technical skills, personal skills, hard skills, they can look up the techniques, and they ask how the technique is done on YouTube. We have manuals. So we focused on the technical skills. And we supported it with e-learning environment in Moodle. So all the documents, what I talked about, for instance, the manual for techniques, the programs, assignments, in the course were also on the Moodle website for the educator course. We also made the demo website for the coach course level 1, so the educators could work with it. This is a photo of educators, and this is the coach in the coach course level 1 who's coaching, making training for their for the coaches. Increase enjoyment of hockey. So that's also one thing we've talked about you believe in, that especially in countries which are developing hockey countries, where the level is not that high that they will compete in Olympic Games or maybe win Olympic Games. That's always a very good impulse for new members. So if you emphasize on the enjoyment of hockey and the fun of hockey, with challenge of course, and instead of doing the drills, doing always the pressure in the training, it will get better training results, it will be more attractive for players, so they will stay in the hockey community, and it will be appealing to new players, and also the parents will see that if there's fun in the clubs, in the trainings, they will send their children to hockey. So in all our trainings, all the sessions, we focus on the fun and enjoyment.
We tried to do a bit of consulting, and we started online with some getting some understanding of the local situation. And it turned out that in Switzerland it's pretty harsh. So there are a lot of regulatory things you have to do due to the government. Both local and in the country. So it was pretty hard to getting a bit further than just understanding what the local situation was. And furthermore, they also had a pairing already with the FIH Academy. In the end, what we did was we did go there and we tried to set up. We set up a meeting both with the FIH and me as a consulting partner for this project. And so the learnings for me were that we should get more commitment. I'll start with one actually. More commitment from both maybe myself and the Swiss hockey in this case, and also managing a bit more the expectations of what is expected throughout the program. What are the desired outcomes both for them and for Euro hockey in this case, and get a better understanding of the challenges that we both have during this project. And again, we should have gone more on site, so in the end we didn't do that much to really support Swiss hockey, mainly because of the time issue that we've had, both from our side as from Swiss hockey. I'll finish off with what are the next steps. So I think we've got a pretty nice framework already in place, but obviously it's something that's constantly evolving. So together with the coaching committee and with the FIH Academy, we're working on developing that qualification work even further and getting better understanding of what each country does, so that we can actually compare pathways and know that, for example, a Dutch level 3 is also a Belgian level 3. And obviously we can do more in consulting countries. I think the main things are exactly what Dick did with Slovenia, is getting grassroots levels up and running, getting local educators to speak the local language. We talk a lot about this a lot within the coaching committee as well. So those are for me the next steps that would ensure an even better coaching.
Left to round up the Institute, to give you the full flavour of everything that we set up. One of the things is to look at the findings which we're doing currently, which Adam is finalising, speaking to all of the partners that have been part of this project for the last 3 years. But some of the findings are also things that we didn't expect to do and the added value that I've spoken about today. One of which was to create the sustainability pillar. There was only 4 pillars originally suggested in the application to the European Union, We've ended up with 7. Some of that was hence and thankful to the review that Adam had given us right at the beginning, and also because we didn't know where to put some of the programs and projects because they didn't sit directly under the first 4 pillars. So sustainability, of course, is a massive word, and it means a lot of things. It doesn't just mean the environment, but that's what we're going to focus on now as one of the programs that we've launched due to the Institute as well. I'm going to bring up Stefan Howland from the German Hockey Federation to explain that.
Today I'm in Germany at the German Hockey Association, responsible as a Director of Education for all the educational stuff in Hockey Germany. And before that, I was...
Your holiday, yeah.
That was my holiday. A little film about that. So before that, I was together with the women national team, responsible as an analyst in the coaching staff of that team, and we went in preparation for the Tokyo Olympics on a little survival camp, and we did at the survival camp. All kinds of survival stuff. So we had to collect wood for the campfire. We had to build our huts to sleep at night. We collected our food. And at these days, we realized how much nature gives us and how much we take as a team. So I'll show you my little film. So, after our little trip, the hockey national team of Germany, the Damas, called the Damas, had the idea of building a hockey forest. And I'm thrilled that Eurohockey adapted the idea and now partnered with Ecology, global climate action workforce, which is, I think, a very great thing, and all the flights, all the travels of the staff will be let's say equalized with Ecology. Not forgetting anything. Yeah, the impact is recognized by global kind marks, and the planted trees will offset all the travels of the board and of the staff of Eurohockey. That's it so far.
The last few slides before lunch. So that means it's done, it's finished, the money was spent, we went to Paris, we went to Copenhagen, we went to Slovenia, and we had a great time, and there were some fantastic partners in this room, and we did share 1 or 2 Cokes and lemonades in those nations as well. But it doesn't quite mean, even if it's Christmas, that we can lay back and leave it all, because we decided back in 2019 that we promised the European Union that we would confirm to keep this institute going without that funding. So here he is again. Nathan Kick launched the Eurohockey Institute publicly at our General Assembly in 2023, and that meant it went live across our new website, again, funded by the European Union. Thank you for that, that's a different project. But it also made it really clear to everyone everything that we were doing for them and we want to make sure we can sustain that moving forward. Because whilst there's core programs in here, there's a lot of things that have been added on in the same way that Adam explained in the research. And the question that I rightly get from Angus from time to time is, don't develop anything else, we've got enough now, Tom. Are you sure you can do this? And I look at Cameron and ask for his help. But we've got to sustain this, and we've got to make it worthwhile. Of course, if this were a heat map, there are certain different programs that require more time than others, but there is still now nearly 40 programs and offers for our national associations. So to do that, I need a lot of help, and that's why I've bought you some beers and lemonades across Slovenia and Copenhagen and other countries, because I want you all to keep helping us as we move forward. But there's also a business case to keep that running and make sure that we keep the same core investment from Euro Hockey into development and education. But one of the added values has been that we started to see an increase in the commercial return that comes into the institute. So with the business club that has been described, and as Rick talked about earlier, the projections are that the business club will grow. Therefore, that means more funding into the institute itself to support some of the programs. We brought down, when we had the core programs that I talked about before that gave us this chance to even start building the institute. They were taking up, of course, 100% of the funding that we had. But we've changed some of the way that we operate those core programs to bring that core funding down to 50%. So it's freed up some more money to bring in more programs, if that makes sense. We've increased our athlete support by 100%, which of course is a great number, but if you had nothing, it's hard not to do 100%. Even I'll take that one. But the athletes' investment over the next 2 years will be 10% of our core budget. The biggest, while this was all good, there has to be a speed bump to slow you down, not get too excited. One of the things that Cameron and I are working on at the moment is that whilst we've brought down the core programme funding, what we need to look at is the cost of the core coaching programmes. I don't mean the funding into national associations that Dick was speaking about in his pilot. I mean, our top 2 programmes take a lot of our budget still. And there's a few different ways that Cameron and I believe that can be sourced, and we'll be taking that with Michelle, Nathan and others in our coaching committee in March 2024 to discuss those options. But while it's one of the professional outlets of hockey, we've got to be careful that we can sustain everything that we do. I've mentioned a few times about the standardisation of fees and expenses for our workforce. It was important, and we just started to implement these service level agreements in the last few weeks, is that everyone understands who's getting paid what at the level of the workforce. And importantly, and where we slip on budget, it might only seem small at 5%, but we slip on budget at times because of the travel costs, because people book late or we tell them late. So we're making sure that we don't have that fall year on year, and we can invest that 5% back into programs like athlete support in the future. So there is some thinking and some science behind this. And that means that it can, in the last 2 years, with the different funding model that we've done, is we've been able to launch the Solidarity funding. This is a core funding programme for the national associations to apply for. You can hear more about it now.
The Euro Hockey Solidarity Grant. Launched in 2021, small grants are available for all our member national associations. For help with strategic planning and projects that suit your nation, including growing participation, developing coaching and officiating, supporting all athletes, and sharing knowledge on club development and how we celebrate volunteering. Submit your initial idea via the Eurohockey Solidarity Grant link. Then our Eurohockey staff will work with you to identify the priorities and clear objectives. Apply now by visiting eurohockey.org.
And the reason we've been able to do that as well is thanks to people like Carola, Peter and Marcos, who have chaired and supported our development committee over the last few years. And we've had feedback from them about they want more control and decision making over where the funding goes. So if they've got particular interest and desire in Wales to develop Hockey ID, great, we'd really like Wales to do that, so that's why I'm saying it, Joe. Or we want another nation to support their strategic growth like we're doing with Croatia next year. We can pinpoint them and push them towards an open funding pot, which now it's got into Cameron's hands, is in much better control as well, because we've Cameron's idea to come up with having it as one pot that can be opened every January for each of the nations to apply into. And we won't be just using that to source sending sticks around and balls around on planes, because going back to Dick's point, it's not strategic just to keep sending sticks and balls out. We need to have that money used to grow their projects, grow their strategies, and grow their national hockey federations. So it's great to be able to launch that and keep it going. What I will expect in 2 years' time, it's setting a line in there that is open to all national associations. The big boys and girls in the room, I expect a decision will be made in 2 years' time that, Nathan, you won't be able to apply for it from the KNHB because I don't think you need it, and Stefan in German hockey. But I do think that the Danish, the Slovenians, etc., that's where the funding needs to go to. So that's something we expect to change in the coming years. And then we do a lot of investment, and you'll hear about it this afternoon with the youth leadership and youth certificate. But also we have a lot of investment into our governance. It's something that Marijke has championed and that Marcos has continued, and we've already started speaking about the next forum we want to run in 2025. And it links back to Adam's work around how we got to make sure that we might be well governed and we might talk about values, but we've got to implore all of our 42 nations to do it. So for example, we've had a speaker from the IOC come to this forum and speak to us about safe sport and safeguarding, and since then Cameron's started the IOC safeguarding course as well. So there's more work to come on governance, and here's a little flavour for those that weren't there. So I'm sure a few familiar faces that you spotted that are in this room as well today, but many more that weren't. And we'll continue to invest in governance, and especially, and we'll hear about this afternoon, especially into young people as well, because they are the leaders that can take the sport forward. And then finally, we're not just throwing money at planting trees, and I absolutely am against greenwashing. But morally, as an organisation, we speak about values a lot in our publications and our communications, so we need to live it as well. And there's different projects that sit under that. There's the Gender Balance Charter that we signed with our nations a few years ago. That means all of our programmes on the Institute are 50-50 in terms of gender balance. It means we've increased the percentage gender representation on our committees as well. And there's other work going on in there around LGBT+, and other aspects of sustainability. So we're still investing into it, and we'll always make sure as a minimum there's a 5% funding into that area at the Institute. So hopefully that gives you the security that I'm not just running off to the beach or Cameron's off to go and get some marshmallows in 2024. We've got a plan of how we sustain it, but we also know where there's some hurdles and some things that we need to improve on to keep it going past 24 and 25 as well. So lastly, from me, a massive thank you to everyone for being here today and for listening through this overview of the Institute. A big thank you to those like Norman, Marika and Carola who gave us the foundation to build on this. And a massive thank you to Peter, Marcos and Angus for supporting us move this forward as we go on. And everyone else in the room, thank you very much for all of your input. I could go on forever about the help and the partnerships that you've all given me, because without your expertise, none of this would have been done. So thank you all very, very much. I want to introduce someone that's been really important within our journey for the last 6 or 7 years in regard to European funding. And it's not someone that works at the European Union this time, but it's someone that has helped me individually on many occasions in the last 6 years, has helped you all and all of the hockey nations in Europe and the FIH in regards supporting hockey's global development as well. He probably wouldn't have said that himself.
That's the end of the presentation, by the way, so I can go home now.
But I think it's also an inspiration to other people around the room that Gino, as the president of Czech Hockey, took it upon himself to learn about European Union funding himself and understand how to navigate it to secure funding back into hockey. So I'm not saying that Gino's a low bar, so if Gino can do it, you can all do it, but I am saying that, so you should be inspired by the work he's done, and that means that we've then been able to work together on projects like this moving forward. So thank you very much from myself, Gino.
So moving the discussion somewhere else, not feeling comfortable, but thank you, Tom, for the intro. We're going to talk about youth leadership, and it's very much related to the topic which we have this morning, because it was all about education, development, and one of the parts which you saw in there is about, or more parts were about youth leadership, and this specific one is about a program which we run the last 3 years with a number of partners who would like to thank up front. We had a last meeting, our final meeting yesterday. We're still finalizing some things for the end of the year, but I think we're all good to go. And some representatives here as well in the room. So before I forget at the end, thank you for all the partners involved. Teasing my friend Tom a little bit. I'm not going to show you pictures of the Eiffel Tower and of the Taj Mahal, because we didn't have time, of course, for those kind of things. So we were hard working on the project, delivering on the results. So yeah, my team couldn't afford these kinds of things, but I can send you the pictures from Tom, guys, if you want something to have a better feeling. No, seriously, we also have a lot of fun, of course, and it belongs to projects, right? You go in three years together with a team, and it's important, of course, to work hard, but at the same time also to enjoy time together, get to know each other a little bit, because that is the only way to get the results at the end. Anybody knows from which song this is? From which singer this is? That's a difficult one, I'm just kidding. It's from Dylan, it's from Bob Dylan, my favorite singers. And because we were thinking when we started the program, it was about all the things we have to do, and you have in mind the end vision, what you want to do, and you want to help the youth leaders to grow, to support them, etc. But when you're in the program, it's more like you're really looking at the steps you have to take, and it's not that you lose sight of the big vision, but it's like yesterday we took it as a kind of the final meeting, but it's not the final meeting because now it actually starts. So yesterday we realized, yeah, I was looking at it's kind of a final meeting, but at the end, and when you find out when you're on the top, you're on the bottom. So it's now, in fact, we worked 3 years hard, but of course it's not the end of the project. Now it's really the start, because we would like to share what we did with the other nations and get the voices of youth leaders heard in more boards, in more clubs, on various different ways. in hockey and outside of hockey. My son liked Minecraft, and he was a young guy, so I asked him, was thinking about getting youth leaders involved or young people involved, so I asked him to create the slides for showing our intellectual outputs. So we had a number of them. Adam in a second, and they will ask everybody to introduce themselves shortly. We'll speak about the foundation. So we didn't want to start from scratch, but what is existing already in the world. Always easier to learn and then to build it on, of course. So strong foundation, Adam will talk about it in a second. Then Tom, and sorry, this was the former, but our Cameron joined this one immediately from the beginning, took this one up on, is a grassroots model. So we said, okay, we identified a number of countries where youth development is big and where these voices are heard and they have serious programs. But within the 42 countries, hockey nations, we saw 3, 4, 5 well developed, 3, 4, 5 something going on, and a lot of them even to the extent of, okay, only the older speak here and the youth, yeah, you just wait out until you get gray hairs, then you're allowed in the boards. Putting it a little bit black and white, but we said, okay, let's create a grassroots program with the main aim, get people, young people together in a country, and also make sure that the board or the clubs take them seriously. So this is one of the outputs what Cameron will talk about. Then Thomas and Bartel is here, we'll talk a bit later. Then it was like kind of the next level. So that was a national program for everybody. The second level was is an 8-month program for a selected group of people. It's an inclusive group, so everybody can join, but at the end it's kind of a small university program for a year to get youth leaders on a higher level in sport management and a lot of other topics, which will be also explained in a second. We talked about career pathways, so, and some of here in the room were also interviewed, so, okay, you're now here, what is actually, how did you get there? And we tried to find, for youth leaders, is there some, are there some golden lines or some golden career pathways which bring you there? Or is it very messy? So we will not speak, we have the output, of course. It's not so part in detail of this presentation of today, but it's available, of course. But this was about inspiring people to see which ways they can go, what are the pitfalls, what did people who went there learn from it, etc. Awareness campaign, also today is a kind of, we worked on this with the group, and the awareness campaign is about sharing this, of course, with everybody and getting everybody inspired. And the insight report and the legacy, of course, very important, is that we make sure that this is a sustainable project. We'll not talk about this too much. I think also Tom mentioned it in the last project, and in fact there we're also aligned with Eurohockey on sustaining this for long term. So I think what Tom mentioned on the legacy is very much also in line with what we're doing. So we're going to focus on the IO2 and IO3 today, as I think this is the most important.
In 10 minutes to outline 2 questions. What is leadership and why is it important? So basically, in terms of my outline, I will go through it in that order. That's our schedule for today. I'll give you a conceptualization of how leadership is thought of out there in academic research, and specifically how youth leadership relates to it. And then I will try and bring these ideas and concepts across to the AIYL project to talk about why it's important for what we did. So this is what I did again. It's a very similar situation to the last project that I outlined. I did another scoping review, again this time because leadership research in sports science is incredibly widespread. It tends to move across lots of different subdisciplines and boundaries. However, there are a lot of psychological papers to understand leadership out there. My scoping review this time involved 149 sources, and again it was a mixture of the peer-reviewed stuff, the gold standard evidence that we possess, as well as grey literature, this time relating to leadership programs, education programs, and so on. What I found was, and many scholars agree, is that leadership is a term that is thrown around like confetti. It's badly defined, it's very broad, it can be understood in multiple different ways. That makes it hard to clearly define and have a one-size-fits-all definition that everybody is happy with. There are multiple perspectives on leadership. The most common approach, however, tends to be what I would call cognitive psychological approaches. That are the types of approaches that tend to attribute certain skills to you as a person, as an individual, as a trait, something that you can develop or have already, and it's something that you carry around with you and apply at need. Motivation and self-efficacy are similar sorts of traits that this approach would often portray and reproduce. And the idea is, in that particular tradition, leadership is thought to be something that anybody could learn if you find the right buttons to press. Now, I'm a sociologist by trade, and I'm also involved in sport development. And whenever I hear an explanation like that, especially on something about a concept such as leadership, my question usually is, where is the theory of power? Where is the idea about how that person's trait is going to be received by others? Will they be dismissed? Will they be respected? Will there be conflict in the room? How is the kind of more socio-cultural relationship element of leadership also defined? I'm not alone in that question, but it is a less common approach to understand leadership in sports science from this multiple different perspectives and across multiple scales. However, the approaches that do take that particular understanding of leadership do agree that leadership is a collective achievement. It's not just about the right individuals with the right skills doing the right things. It's a collaborative thing, and it works across lots of different levels. It's also something that everybody can get involved in their own way. There's not only one way to be a leader, but others can basically contribute such that leadership doesn't belong to any one individual. Now, it's always really risky to include a diagram in one of these presentations because I had no idea how big this slide was going to be. We don't have to go through this particular slide now, but it's basically one of the comprehensive models of leadership which is out there in the scientific literature. And you can see here, and again, you don't have to look at the detail, but over here, these are the traits, the kind of moral identity, lived experiences, the darker traits to leadership as well. And leadership across personal relationships, groups and teams, whole organizations or whole systems. And there is kind of flux and transfer of actions and reactions and relationships at all of these different levels. And it never ends. It's a cycle. It's something that one continues to do or fail to do on an ongoing basis. So how does youth leadership fit into this then? Well, there are again many common assumptions and assertions over which the evidence is fairly comprehensive when it comes to youth leadership. The first thing is that it can begin at a very young age and it develops in stages. The consensus is that adolescence is the latest that it develops. It could develop even before that time. We also know that leadership is a dynamic and complex learning process. As we've just outlined, it shifts across multiple scales as people become familiar or exposed to new settings and organizations and cultures. However, there is agreement that should the conditions be right, all young people do have the potential to be leaders, not just in the future, but in the present. And again, in sport, we often have this assumption that work with young people should be about what they could be. The argument here is youth leadership is about what they are now, as well as what they could be in the future. However, it doesn't just grow on trees. Leadership has to be intentionally and systematically taught. That's important because it gives young people a voice in many cases, and it can support social justice. A lot of research out there on youth leadership works with programs working in deprived communities or underrepresented groups, and it provides them with a vehicle to be heard and become decision makers themselves. And the other thing we can say is that in all of these contexts, learning to be a leader has no end point. It's a lifelong commitment to personal development. So how did this apply to the project that we're talking about today, the Aspiring and Inspiring Youth Leadership? Well, a lot of these principles cross over into practical applications about how some of the more successful courses actually work. The goal in these kinds of programs tends to be fostering a transformational leadership model. That's a technical term, but it basically relates to a type of leadership in which the leader delegates and empowers their team to take control over the things that they have the competence for. It's not just about one person taking a lead and deciding everything, it's having the confidence to work in teams. It's also ideal to have a learner-centered approach where learning is not only applied, but it's supported by theory and it's learning on the job. It's going and doing and gaining experiences, and it helps young people, and any leader for that matter, be reflexive about who they are and how they're received and what their role and actions have done. We also, in many successful programs, have to look beyond trait development and also have the people involved in the program think about the context that they have to be a leader in. Who's in it? What cultural norms are expected? What kind of experiences could they gain from those sorts of settings? And it's often best to learn these kinds of experiences in groups and have discussions and reflect both among young leaders themselves, but also with mentors and other experienced individuals at the same time. So that's what many of these successful programs often look like. Okay, so it's not part two. That's probably 2 words that should have been from the previous slides. You can tell I did this 1 second now. Anyway, conclusions. What we can say is that leadership, at least the consensus would suggest, is a multi-level concept. We need to avoid falling into the trap of assuming it's something that we can give to a person and that they'll carry with them and apply whenever they need to. We also need to, and well, we don't need to, but we can definitely suggest that youth leadership can be a force for social good. Sport is an appropriate fora through which to learn youth leadership, but it's not enough on its own. Sport can be a vehicle towards learning to be a leader, but it doesn't happen spontaneously. It has to be systematically taught. And again, we can say that there are many different sport youth leadership programs that are more successful because they're very learner-centered, they're very flexible, they provide a mixture of experience, theory and reflection, and they basically encourage young people to engage with other young leaders and mentors to the same degree. That is my whistle-stop tour of what leadership is, why it's important, and how youth leadership fits in as well.
Next part, and before I'm going to do a small social experiment, because this is about youth leadership. So, and I would like all of you to go to a small experiment where you all get young. So in your head, at least physically, I will not be able to change you. That will be an expensive experiment, but we're going to get young in our heads. So all the people from the last century, who were born in the last century, please imagine yourself now 10 years younger. Yeah, so, I have to go a few steps, Norman, with you, but that's fine, we get this. So, think of yourself where you were 10 years ago. So think about where your family was. Sorry? How you looking like, your family was, what you were doing for a job, what you're doing with sports. And then go another 10 years for those, some are already at 0 now, but another 10 years younger, so the youth leaders can stay at the age which they are. Another 10, and try to get to something like 18. So if you imagine you were 18 and you imagine, so how was the situation with your family, who were your friends, boyfriend, girlfriends, where you were going out, where were you hanging out, was it hockey, was it another sport, were you sitting in a discotheque with Bartol drinking long hair and shouting words and drinking beer, or because we're going to make so I hope you're all a little bit in the mental state of feeling young again, because it's important for the second part. And I'm going to introduce Ukne. So we all feel like Ukne now.
My surname is terrible for international relations, and it's totally fine if you don't remember it. I was born in Lithuania, in a very, very small town. How small, to be precisely, is 5,742 people are living in my town. So I was born there, and I grew up in this mini town. And the third fact is, my dad is a hockey coach. So my dad was a very simple guy, you know. His wife told him that he needs to take care of the children. What you do with the children, you put them in the hockey pitch and see what happens. So he was coaching boys, who was at that time 11, 12, and I was 6 years old girl playing with the boys, hockey. And And where it led me to be, I played hockey for 25 of my years of life. I played for Lithuanian national team, I was a captain, and I love hockey very much. But every time I was playing hockey as a youth leader, I was playing hockey. I wanted to go to the pitch, I wanted to, win the competitions, and I didn't think there is more out of hockey than going to the pitch and playing hockey. And we joke a lot about these projects now and the times when we traveled somewhere and etc. But I was 17 and I got the invitation to go to Italy. Italy, Rome, food, gelato and things like that. And they told me I'm going to be there with 30 other young people. We're going to play some hockey, some sport, enjoy the time there and just spend time nicely together. And I said, yes, of course. Why not? And it was not a competition, but there is something where we are going to gather together and talk about inclusion in sports. And I go there, I have a very good time, and then suddenly I am with another person who is not able to communicate by words. So the person only has the sign language, and that was the first crush in my life because I always thought that the sign language is universal, and it seems that all national countries have their own sign languages, so that was already something, huge barrier in my head. And I'm there going with the train with that person, and I have 2 hours on the train, and I'm like, okay, so how are we gonna talk now? And that was something uncomfortable for me in that situation, but we managed. I have all the stories about his dog, about his hockey and etc. We managed to communicate somehow. And then after that one trip, I was okay, it was a good trip, it was fun time, I was behaving nicely, discussing things with other youth leaders. I came back home and I had no intention to go for the leadership. It was just one nice time project and etc. But the people who were there, they had another thought about it. They wanted me to be involved in at that time, it was European non-governmental youth and sport organization, and they wanted me to be in the board. And I was like, what? Me? From this small town in the European Board of Youth and Sports? Are you sure? And they not only encouraged me and asked me to go, they called the National Olympic Committee of Lithuania to support me, because you need a signed letter that the National Olympic Committee would support you. So they did that. They called the Olympic Committee, they said, we have this person, you need to meet her, talk with her, we want you to nominate her for this. So that was the first time I was encouraged by somebody else, at that time older, to do something I was not intentionally thinking to do. I came in the committee, I was specifically working with inclusion working group, a lot with the people with disabilities. I started to learn the sign language as well, the English one, it was very interesting times. I was sharing about the inclusion. I found out about para-hockey at the time, it was called para-hockey, not IDs hockey at the time, and etc. And then after 2 years of being in the board, the president of the board, who was a man at the time, six years older than I am, he said, Ugne, I want you to go for elections to be the head of the organization. And I looked at him, are you serious, man? Like, this is such a huge organization. It's like all the members are Olympic committees. It's a huge budget. It's a lot of responsibility. Why me? What do you think about it? Because I didn't have this intention. And that person put the effort to convince me why it would be a good step to do that, and etc. And I did that. I went for elections, I was elected. I'm now re-elected for next mandate. I'm running the European Youth and Sports Organization as a head for already 4 years and 2 more to go. And the point which I'm making here, that it's not always that the young people have this intention or understanding where they want to go. It's also about all of us in the room to make sure we see the qualities of young people and encourage them to go for it, but also invest time in it. Because it's not enough to give the space for young people when we talk about it, but it was already mentioned also in Adam's research. It's very much important of the mentors or someone who would stand next to you and reminds you that you can do it. So that was my journey. I'm also very happy that the hockey is still there. I was the last 2 years in the hockey development committee, hopefully staying there. And I'm also now, what I said, why youth leadership is important, I'm paying back to Lithuanian hockey by organizing youth in Lithuanian hockey, by organizing youth leadership academies, and etc. So somebody who invested in me, it pays off because now I can invest in others and do it in my national country. So that is from my side.
Jugne, for this one. And I would like to bring on Cameron, and appreciate if we can all look at this presentation not as an intellectual output which you created, but it's something which we can use to inspire young people around us, because it should be a tool. And as also Jugne says, the tool itself doesn't help. We need mentors, we need ambassadors, we need people around it who believe this is the right thing and are going to reach out a hand.
So I've had the pleasure of working with, I think, everybody in this room, apart from Gail herself. But yeah, I'm Cameron. I am the Eurohockey Institute Coordinator, is the new role. As you've all seen, that's my responsibility to keep all of that running. So yeah, it's a lot of responsibility. And one of the things that's going to be brought into it is what was IO2 in this program. IO2 is not a very sexy name, it's a very boring name, the intellectual output too. So with it coming into the Eurohockey Institute, we've given it the lovely name of the Eurohockey Institute National Youth Leadership Certificate. And all of the work to create this certificate, which you can see, or the content you can see in front of you in that booklet, was put together not just by me and with some help from my colleagues in Eurohockey, but was also put together with the help of Street Games, who have got years and years of experience of engaging with the community in the UK and inspiring young people. So Andrea, who's here, who's going to give everybody a wave, she's really got some fantastic expertise that she was able to share with me and help to structure some of this content. We also got a really good look at Hockey Wales, and Hockey Wales were one of the inspirations behind the original bid for this project. So the Hockey Wales have this Hockey Young Ambassadors scheme, and that looks at young people from 12 to 25, I believe. Nailed it. And it's an enormous program relative to what we have across the rest of hockey. It's enormous. Joe was just telling me that the cohort for this year has just launched with, was it 120 people? 120, which is, you know, it blows pretty much anywhere else in Europe out of the water. So we were really lucky that Hockey Wales agreed to be a part of the program and to again share their expertise with us. So we were able to learn from both of these groups to build this IO2 program into what it is today. The goal when we began was to inspire and upskill youth leaders around hockey, and also to act as a launching point for national associations to create their own youth leadership panels or networks. So we've seen what Hockey Wales has been able to do with their Young Ambassadors program, and we thought if we can get a fraction of our national associations to do something that's a fraction of the size, we'll be so happy. So throughout the program, the first thing that we did is we developed the content with this group. And then what we moved on to do was we then piloted it. So within the partnership itself, we had members such as Street Games, Hockey Wales, but we also had a series of youth leaders. Some of the youth leaders are in the room and we'll give you a wave as well. Danilo, Lisa, no waves, super. So the youth leaders, they also took this content when it was in one of its early iterations, and 4 of them were able to run pilots in their own country. From these pilots, we learned a lot. We learned a lot from the delivery of the content, but we also learned a lot from the actual creation of the pilots themselves. And in fact, the difficulty of creating the pilots and the structure around the pilots. We wanted to have 6, so all of the youth leaders involved. We wanted to have 1 for each, but we weren't quite able to do that because of various reasons. And also the shape and the style of these programs was very different to what we sat in a room in Manchester and we wrote out what our ideal structure would be. Our ideal structure was going to be over the whole course of a weekend, with an overnight stay, with lots of evening activities, lots of time for the schedule. But what we found when we actually went to deliver these pilots is that that's really, really hard. And depending on the context of the nations, it can be even harder in some and slightly easier in others. So I wanted to shine the spotlight on 2 pilots that were possibly more successful, or really taught us kind of different things. So one of them was the Danish pilot, and we've got Benny in the room who can give us a wave. No, nobody wants to give us a wave. So yeah, Benny and one of the youth leaders called Lena, who was with us in the meeting yesterday, they put together one of the best pilots. They were able to get some of the youth leaders from, I believe, 2 different clubs into a room at the National Sports Centre and have an overnight stay and to go through the programme. And since then, that's launched into their own youth panel, or their own youth group. That's the next step, I think, is what do you call it? How do you put it down in the statutes and things like that? But they had an in-person pilot across 2 days, overnight stay. They had fun. Apparently there's a darts league going on amongst the competitors, amongst the participants. So that was a really successful example. And for them, they looked at our content and they took some of it, but they also mixed in things based on their own context. We look at Hockey Wales. Hockey Wales were able to run a pilot, but as you've seen, or as I've told you about with the Hockey Young Ambassadors programme, they have a lot going on for youth already. And also, with hockey in Wales, the calendar is much, much busier. In Denmark, being a smaller hockey country, the calendar is less busy. But in Wales, for instance, the time that they are able to afford to a programme like this, amongst the other ambassador scheme that they have, and also the playing schedule, the coaching schedule, they were only able to give it a limited amount of time, so they ran an online pilot. The point that I'm trying to reach here, I know it's been taking a while, but the point I'm trying to reach here is that we have 42 different nations within Euro Hockey, and those are 42 different contexts. So if we produced a resource booklet that told all 42 nations, you must do this if you want to have a youth panel, that just wouldn't work. And that's the same for all of the courses and all the programs that we talked about earlier today. Everything in our institute is entirely flexible to adapt to as many of the nations as we can. And that's the biggest thing that we learned from the pilot. So the actual resources that we produced a presentation, an adaptable and interactive presentation. We aren't precious about it at all. You can cut it up, you can remove the pictures of me, you can do whatever you like. As soon as we hand it over to a youth leader, we'll have a conversation with them and we'll just work with them to do whatever they like. It's also got a handbook of additional activities that can be used to replace or supplement those. There's also things in there like tools on how can you create a discussion. So even if you move entirely away from some of the structures and some of the topics that we'd suggest you talk about, you can still use the booklet as a guidance on how to discuss the topics that you want to talk about that suit your national context. And both of these have been translated into 6 languages by the youth leaders with a little bit of help from AI. But this again allows it to be adaptable to different nations. And if a nation asks for a little bit of help with translation, I'll speak to our friend AI and they can help us and we can work together to have some adapted program. What's actually in it? So it's split into 4 modules, and these modules have come from both Adam's research as well as what will be talked about in the follow-up program, the IO3, the kind of the higher level program. Because what we'd like to see is we'd like to see some sort of pathway that moves up. So communication, leadership, governance, project management. Communication is the one that really sets the scene. So we set the scene by allowing all of the participants to interact with each other, lowering those barriers between these people who may not know each other, and enabling the rest of the program to go on. Leadership is thinking a little bit about their own leadership styles and the leadership styles that they react well to. Governance, it's not very sexy, but it's a little bit talking about how, as a group, you can work together to build a project. And then finally, in the project management stage, one of the outputs that we'd like to see from this program, almost regardless of how you follow the content, is we'd like to see that the group that comes together produce something at the end. This can be really anything. I know Bartel's program that he'll talk about later, that has quite a defined request for a project that they want delivered. But for this, we'd love to just see the group produce anything. Produce the next meeting, produce a youth panel, produce a youth festival, a tournament. It doesn't really matter. We just like to see them produce something. Because the trick here is if they have to produce something, then they probably have to talk to each other again. So that's how we hopefully create these meetings and these panels to move on into the future. But the very cheesy, real goal of the content is that we'd like to take a group of strangers into a...
Click 4 times.
4 times. There you go. Into a youth panel with a plan. That's the goal of the content. And again, if somebody chops it up, burns it, gets rid of the leaflet, as long as they follow this path, this very basic path, then we'll be happy with how it's been delivered. So what are the actual goals? If they can chop it up and do what they like with it, what are the actual goals of it? So the goals are to inspire and upskill youth leaders around hockey. We'd like to inspire them to do more, and we'd like to upskill them so that they have the capacity to deliver a project. In the long term, we'd like to increase the number of youth panels or groups across hockey in Europe, like I've said. And how would we achieve this? So number one, we'd like to deliver, or we'd like people in the nations to deliver the program as much as possible. That's pretty simple. But what we've realized is it might not be as straightforward as that. So what we're really willing to do as the people who wrote the project and the youth leaders who are involved in it is we'd really love to share our knowledge. If there are national associations who want to do this, but they feel they are lacking in the knowledge or the energy to deliver something like this, then we've got lots of people who are, really want to stay involved, who really want to give the energy and support the nations. Whether that's Zoom calls, whether we can access some funding and send somebody out, that's the plan. To just share the knowledge that we have and how we've built it. And people like Alina, who ran successful programs in Denmark, she can share her knowledge and her successes, what failed for her, how she adapted the program to her nation. That's what we're going to do. We're going to share the knowledge. And finally, that was mentioned earlier on, there's the opportunity for solidarity grants. So if a nation wants to run a program like this, and the thing that's getting in the way is funding, then we'd absolutely encourage them to apply for solidarity grants.
That's the base of the pyramid, and then we go a little bit up. And I'd like to introduce Bartel, who will speak on behalf of the colleagues who worked on the roof of the house, or this level number 2 of the house.
Let me start with a very short personal story, because it's exactly this week, 20 years ago, I was sitting in an office like this as a young, starting, ambitious lawyer. I just passed my exam as a lawyer, and I was sitting here in my office with a lot of papers when my boss enters the room. And when the boss enters your room, something is going to happen. And he was going to sit somewhere where you are, named Gino, and he only said 6 words. Bart, which is me, you need to make a decision. And sometimes in life, things become extremely clear and bright. Because what he said, you need to make a decision. Either you stay a lawyer, or you choose for your passion. And in my case, I was a starting, young, ambitious hockey coach, coaching the men of Kampong. Peter was still whistling my games. And basically, I needed to make a decision. Going for certainty, or choosing for my passion. And in my case, it was coaching. But the same you can apply for people that want to be a board member, a referee, or whatever position in sports. Choosing between your passion or combining your passion with your traditional normal work. And it's exactly this challenge, this question that all those young leaders that we've been working with the last 3 years are facing. We are passionate by sports, we're passionate about hockey, but how can we combine it with my study and my work? And wow, how great would it have been if there would have been a program 20 years ago for me that I could follow and to talk and share those issues and challenges. And that's also why we are so thankful that we're finally going to start with a program for these type of young, ambitious people. And in this case, we call it leaders, but it can be volunteers, referees, coaches, it doesn't matter. People that are leading in their way within the hockey world. So, you already touched on the challenges of the next generation people that are facing a changing world, that are changing uncertainty, that have dealt with COVID during their student period. So, what does it mean for building a leadership program? What does it take to build a Champions League leadership program? When was the last time that you attended a leadership program that you think, wow, this was really great? What's the difference between average and good? Well, the first thing, it's about really inspiring participants. Being inspired in such a way that you want to stay, that you want to stick. But on the other hand, you need to deal with issues like very practical issues like flexibility. And in the last 3 years, we've done a lot of pilot sessions, lectures with young people. And we faced a lot of practical, logistical issues. So how can you build a leadership program that is able to adapt with those logistical issues. Well, long story short, the last 3 years we've been building on this big manual, course manual, which basically consists out of 5 modules, both online and physically, to face the next generation leaders. Because we want to start with a group of 8 participants, a mix from different countries in Europe, a combination of different backgrounds, different people, but basically between the age of 17 and 27. Young of mind, that's our basically definition of young of mind. And yes, the key thing is, the starting point is they bring in an own challenge, an own project from their own country. Why? Because then during the program they will work and develop this issue, their challenge of their own country. Basically, they're already improving the issues in their own country. So the starting point is bringing their own project. And actually we're going to judge also by a selection via Dragon's Den environment, what is the quality of your challenge, of your project. And now the main thing is, because I've been fortunate that 20 years ago I had some people around me that were inspiring me, that were challenging me, that were coaching me, that every participant needs to have a coach from their own federation that is attached to this program. And that's also a question for the federation itself. If you are going to introduce a participant, you also need to think about who is going to be the senior person of that country that's going to be the mentor, the coach of this participant. So it's a combination of the participant and the coach, mentor that's going to enter this program. So what's going to be? It's going to be an environment of 8 months, a learning environment where the majority is online. I will be very honest, 3 years ago we started with a lot of physical sessions, but the reality is that physical sessions with a combination of traveling, time availability is an issue for a lot of young people and could be also an issue not to start this program. So we've been thinking and brainstorming how can we make an online environment that is so inspiring that it is still a reason to start this program. And yes, we're going to end this program with a physical 2-day session at one of the big HIF tournaments, Euro hockey tournaments. They can be even the European Cup or an HIF tournament, HIL tournament, yes. So, we've been brainstorming about all the possible topics that we could apply during this program. In the end, we brought it down to 5 main points. Those 5 main points. Yes, they need to know a little bit about leading high performance. You need to know about the key models like the SPLIS model, the athlete constraint model, the athlete development models. Just a pressure cook environment where you know how to lead the technical environment, because sport in the end is our core product. Like it or not, it's about sports, so you also need to know the essence, the basic principles about sports. Leading technical management. And yes, it's also about the culture. We call it the DNA course. And DNA, of course, is used now everywhere. But what we mean with DNA is that you understand that Spanish hockey at the big clubs, for example, is different compared to the hockey in the Netherlands, because the characteristics of the clubs are different compared with the characteristics of Dutch clubs or English clubs or Danish clubs. But what are those characteristics? What is the environment? What is the culture? What are the artifacts? What are the habits, the environment? So that you understand wherever you are going to be applied as a leader or a coach, you understand the specific characteristics. We call it DNA thinking and bench learning. You're not just going to copy best practices of another environment to your own environment. No, you're going to apply it, translate it into your own specific country, club or federation. That's what we call sports and culture. Yes, there will be a very intensive personal leadership and team development program, which will be a long way, the 8 months period, but it will be one module specifically on leading effective teams. Yes, and Adam, you already did a great lecture, introduction lecture on governance. You need to know the basics of sports and governance, the challenges. Governance feels always a little bit boring, but if you understand the quality, that governance is not only the rules and regulations, it's the brains, it's the culture, it's the leadership, it's a combination of all those things that create good governance. And yes, we also connect it to the ESG, to the sustainability part, because like it or not, but this is going to be the next thing in the next 5 years. So understanding those things and also this broad definition of sustainability, you need to understand it. And the last but not least, it's about value creation and creating also your own business model. And of course, you can have a business model, but value creation is an even bigger thing. What is, in the end, creating value in your club, in your federation? Understand those models, concepts, and in the end also apply to your own project, to your business plan. And then in the end, you will, at the final physical module, you will going to present your final results of your plan to a jury, which also is going to be a beautiful testimony of the last 8 months. And basically, after that, you're going to be able to apply it in the real world. The timeline, 8 months, don't focus too much on the real starting point, but basically it's always start with this Dragon Den to select those 8 people. And then from there on we will start with the online sessions. And those online sessions will be sessions of a period of 1 week where it will be 1 day really packed with online sessions. But during that week you're going to work on your project. You need to prepare in teams, come back in the online session, go back to your office, desk research, etc. So it's not like 2 weeks fully online because you're going to become crazy. It's only very specific, intense moments where you're going to be online, and during the rest of the week you're going to work, and in the end of every module you've got your presentation with your team depending on the topic on that specific issue. And then of course the coaching with your mentor, and I already mentioned how important this mentor is going to be, is going to start. He's going to prepare you also for your final presentation here at the physical moment. And we hope that we're going to start with the first batch. And that's going to be a changing moment, that we're going to start really with the first pilot group. We're now busy to implement it. I mean, making those manuals is one thing, but now going from manual to the real world is a big thing. So we got a couple of people who are also now ready to start the moderation and also the implementation. Jamie Hooper, our referee, is going to be involved. Other people are going to be involved. We're not just going to leave it right here. We really want to make it happen. So we hope that within a couple of months we're going to start with the first batch, but it will require a lot of all federations. And I also want to use this opportunity to thank all the youth leaders here, because they've been part of all the testing. We've done a lot of test modules, lectures, and it was also very inspiring to do that together with a lot of the people over here. So far, thank you.
What you've all been waiting to hear is about the chips and the fries. And as luck would have it, and it's a nice circular moment, this, is the person that got it right was Norman himself. It was, of course, not about fries, it was always about chips. And it would devastate to be that no one would put curry on top of their fish and chips as well, because that is absolutely the best thing on top of chips. So that was the winner. The reason I talked about chips and fries was not because we were in Brussels, it was because of this moment, and when Gino came to me and asked about developing youth leadership. Because I remember, and listening to Ugni brought back memories as well, when I was working full-time in the greatest fish and chip shop in the world, no arguments there, is that I was also on the hockey pitch as well at the same time, and I was doing things that Bartel talked about, that Gino has mentioned, that Ugni talked about, that I didn't recognise were part of leadership or supporting or project management or sitting on boards of clubs, governance. There were things that I was just doing as I was eating free fish and chips 4 times a week. So when this idea came from Gino, it struck a chord with me that when I was 18 years old and I was in the youth leadership category, wouldn't it have been great if there was that validation that Bartel spoke about for the work that many youth leaders in this room and across Europe are doing? So why don't we give youth leaders in Europe the opportunity to validate those voluntary experiences that they're putting into our hockey family? So it was great to hear as well from the youth leaders over the past few weeks and years and months about the different careers that they might want to get involved in and the ups and downs. They might not have a linear path into their jobs,
but can we validate some of the experiences wherever they are in their career as they help support the hockey family? So my promise again at the start when I was speaking with Gino was to make sure that this had a lasting impact. Whatever was developed and given by the brains and the minds of the youth leaders and fed back to us old, some grey-haired people in suits at this side, that we could keep these programs in the Institute. And what we used to have was the Youth Leadership Festival. And it's a validation every 2 years, but that's not enough. Just to bring 50 young people between the ages of 18 to 30 together every 2 years, it's amazing and it's awesome, and it's the first thing I stepped into 6.5 years ago. So it's always got a soft spot in my heart. But what more could we do between those 2 years to validate all the support that these youth leaders are putting in across their countries, even if they don't recognise it? So hence why we as Eurohockey will sustain these two programmes that you've heard about today. I think the sexy names were IO2 and IO3. But we will keep those going, and as I've explained earlier, we've looked at the sustainability side in terms of operations and the finance to make sure that these programs will sustain themselves. And of course, how flexible, and especially this one, will be to hit in each of the nations that want to take it on themselves. So it's my promise, representing Eurohockey here today, that we will sustain this support for youth leadership going on, and we're always open to expanding that support for youth leaders, because it shouldn't be middle-aged, white, grey-haired men. I think that's what the academic study said from Adam. We need to make sure that we're bringing youth leaders through. And I'm also proud to say, I think tomorrow I'm going to jump the gun 24 hours, is that the Youth Leadership Panel will now become a Youth Leadership Committee as well, which the significance there means that that's a body then that is on the same level as all of our committees, and it's the nations that put people forward onto a committee rather than us choosing who it is. So we put onus back to our national members to put people forward to be represented at a Eurohockey level, and that means we'll also, alongside this, have a committee of 18 to 30-year-olds that will keep supporting our programs, our development and education as well. So thank you to everyone that's been involved in the AIYL program. Thank you to Gino for inspiring and bringing this project to light 3.5, 4 years ago as well. And Cameron, thank you already for 24 and 25.
Okay, so these were all the presents, but now we would like something, or I would appreciate something back for you, and not today. But of course there's always a call to action, and that's why many of you are invited here to have a good time, to have a laugh. And at the same time also to help this activity. So we will get back together with Eurohockey with you with more information about some details. When is the application, what is needed. We'll go, and we go in two ways. So we go to the national federations, but we also said it's important to go directly to the youth leaders, because we don't want somebody accidentally or inaccidentally blocking somebody to get the opportunity to be in this program. So we want to reach out to the youth leaders themselves, because we have quite good networks, talk a bit to them about this one, and they can knock on the door on the federations. Of course we hope it's a two-side cooperation and both sides are going for this one. But even if a youth leader wants something and might not get immediately, with all the good intentions, the support from the board, then I'm sure we have here some people who can help to convince the board that it's maybe good at least to take a first step. So we would like, of course, we need the two parties, and we would like them to work together to make it successful, because at the end the impact should be not here in Brussels, but should be in the nations, in the 42 nations which we're supporting, and we would like to see the impact on the pitch. And I'm sure that we would like to see the impact that after some years we see more and more people here who we see now who have grown from a young person looking still for the way until somebody making the decisions here on the table about the future of hockey.